The morning of September 11, 2001, the world changed, and George W. Bush's presidency with it. 4 civilian planes were hijacked by terrorists from a group called Al-Qaeda. 2 of them were slammed into the towers of the World Trade Center in New York, another one into the Pentagon, and a 4th was crashed in the fields of Pennsylvania. Around 3,000 people were killed, and a country that had thought it was at peace suddenly found itself at war. George W. Bush was born in New England, but spent most of his childhood in Texas. It was a pretty relaxed and privileged upbringing, kind of a scamp as a kid, got in trouble at school from time to time. The most searing moment in his childhood was the death of his young sister, Robin, who died of leukemia. And George W. Bush took it upon himself to try to comfort his mother. And I think that sort of helped shape his personality for years to come. Jeb was always assumed to be the one who would be successful in politics. He seemed more together. His brother was kind of a ne'er-do-well to some extent early in life. It took him years until he finally got his act together. And so when George W. ultimately does start his political career, the family's a little skeptical of it. His mother, in fact, tells him not to run for governor because he's going to lose. Ultimately, of course, he proved her wrong, something probably most sons like to do when their mom tells them they can't do something. As governor, Bush was a bipartisan leader because in Texas you had no option. In some ways that wasn't as hard as it would be later in Washington because Texas Democrats are not that different than Republicans in their philosophy. But he worked hard to cross party lines and work together to cut taxes and pass some education reforms and juvenile justice reforms. And I think he showed that he could turn this idea of conservatism toward compassionate goals. That would eventually be what he would call compassionate conservatism. He was popular. He swamped his Democratic opponent in 1998, and it didn't take long for him to set his sights on the White House.
If all goes well, you're looking at the next president of the United States.
He wasn't necessarily the most informed candidate in the world at first. It took him a while to get up to speed on a lot of issues, but what he had that Gore didn't was sort of a touch with people. You know, the old test of, do you want to have a beer with this person? On election night 2000, the results seemed to go back and forth through the evening. At one point, Florida was going for Gore. At another point, it was going for Bush. So both candidates went to bed that night not knowing who was going to be president. It would take 35 more days to figure that out.
I will treat the office with care, never take it for granted, and always remember to whom it really belongs.
On the bright sunny day of Tuesday, September 11, 2001, President Bush woke up in Florida. He was there to do a school event and was told by aides that something had happened in New York. And like most people, he thought there must be some sort of crazy accident. And he goes out and he sits in the classroom with a large number of students, and they're reading a book, My Pet Goat. Andy Card, his chief of staff, silently moves up to him, whispers in his ear, "A second plane has hit the World Trade Center. America is under attack."
Today we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
He gets on Air Force One and the plane rockets into the sky, faster, higher than it ever does, and is eventually escorted by fighter jets, something that really brought home just how serious this moment really was. Bush ended up flying on Air Force One from military base to military base because they weren't sure whether it was safe to bring him back to Washington. Finally, he grew tired of this and said, "We have to go back. I'm the president."
None of us will ever forget this day. Yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world.
3 days after 9/11, President Bush went up to New York to visit Ground Zero. People there wanted to hear him speak. They gave him a bullhorn. He climbed on top of a shattered fire truck, and he starts to say things, reassuring people about what had happened. They couldn't hear him, and he says,
"I can hear you, the rest of the world hears you, and the people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon."
I think Islam was a mysterious concept to most Americans at that point. Most Americans probably didn't know anybody who was Muslim, and so they didn't know what to make of it. Is this something that is targeting us because they don't like us? Is this something that we should be afraid of? Bush didn't buy into the overall prejudice against Muslims. He understood that there were people who were good Muslims and who were bad Muslims, just like there were good Christians and bad Christians. And what he needed as a president who was fighting a war against a group like Al-Qaeda was allies who were Muslim, people who were going to help. Alienating them would be a mistake. One of the first things that Bush did after 9/11 was to go visit a mosque in Washington. No president had ever done that before, but he wanted to make the point that whatever our war with terrorism was going to be, whatever the war with Al-Qaeda was going to be, it was not going to be a war with Islam.
These acts of violence against innocents violate the fundamental tenets of the Islamic faith. And it's important for my fellow Americans to understand that.
It worked to some extent. It didn't obviously keep people who were anti-Muslim from being anti-Muslim, but I think it helped shape the common dialogue. Presidents matter, symbols matter, and the things they do, the things they say to the American public, particularly in moments of crisis, carry enormous weight. I think most historians will look at that period immediately after 9/11 as the high point of Bush's presidency, when he had the country behind him, when he had the world behind him. He rose to the occasion. He kind of transcended the kind of rookie presidency he had been running up to that point and became really a national leader and a world leader.